Welcome in, Draft Nicks. It is time to talk Pittsburgh Steelers with your friends here at Draft Nation and Draft 412. Speak of the devil, look who I got with me, JT, here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers coming out of their bye week and headed to Washington. Washington been talked a lot about lately, let's be honest, but for different reasons. This is football. We're talking football here, people. And
Thank God.
JT, yeah, we're lucky enough to have one of the best to talk football and talk Steelers with us, the Steel City Insider himself, Jim Wexell, joining us. Jim, thank you so much for making the time as we move, like I said, out of the bye week, past the trade deadline now, which we'll get to in a second, and into the back half of the season. The Steelers have built themselves a nice bit of cushion, but when we looked at the record coming into the year, this was the opportunity they had in the early first half of the schedule. Now the second half of the schedule kicks in. All 6 division games, the Eagles, the Chiefs at Acrisure Stadium on Christmas Eve, and this up-and-coming Commanders team that we'll get to in a second as well. But let's start maybe with, any lessons learned from the first half of the season. There's plenty to pull apart and talk about, I guess, and digest from the first 8 games of the season, but just some of your biggest takeaways.
I did not learn any lessons, man. I'm sorry. I was, takeaways. They can overcome their offensive line. Chemistry. Let's say chemistry is overrated by the media because it seems like they have a change on their offensive line. I asked Mason McCormick because Zach Frazier wouldn't talk Monday. PR guy was in his ear, and I said, Zach, you want to talk? He goes, no. How about Wednesday? We talk Wednesday. I was just talking to them, and sometimes talking to them means they just told me not to say I'm in the starting lineup. so I went to Mason McCormick to get that confirmation because that's what we have to do. I said, Mason, what's it like to have Zach back? Oh, it's great. It's great. So he confirmed that Zach is back. All right, so get that out of the way. But I said, Mason, it's another change. What about chemistry? He said, we've all practiced with each other. We've been practicing with Ryan McCollum since the spring. It didn't hurt us. We don't need the chemistry that way. We're practicing with these guys all the time. So it's the same guys. It's not like new guys are coming in. So I think that's one takeaway, that the in and out shuffling of the offensive line is a little overrated on our part in the media in terms of chemistry. I think these guys know each other well. So that's one thing. I want to know more about the run defense, whether by scheme they're doing it. They're not playing much nose tackle. They're pretty light. They're not playing much of Landon Roberts. Maybe those inside linebackers aren't as good as we've been expecting. Maybe that's another takeaway. And let me see another takeaway. I got to give you 3. Najee Harris can be an effective winning back. I don't know if he's a championship back, but he's playing winning ball.
Jim, we actually had an answer. Finally got an answer to something yesterday. The Steelers finally got a wide receiver. We've been talking about a receiver since seemed like Brandon Ayuk went back in early training camp. It's been a name, and all these names have come through us. It got to Darius Slayton and Cortland Sutton this past week, and then we end up getting Mike Williams from the New York Jets. What's your take on this? Are you finally happy we got a receiver? I know we've talked about it before. You weren't a guy that thought we definitely need a receiver, but how do you feel about this?
I've mentioned Mike Williams several times. Every time I do, I get hate in my comments section. There are people that just hate him and say, stop bringing him up. I've always said for a late round pick, I thought 5th was a little high, but now I'm learning that it's the lesser valued 5th round pick. So, okay, they didn't have the 6th round to trade, and that's what I thought he was worth. And he's different. A lot of these other guys that have been mentioned are smaller guys. They've got enough small guys. They actually have wide receiver depth. They didn't have that starter. So, bringing in more depth wouldn't have helped. I like the fact that Mike Williams is different, and he's in the past shown he's a moonball guy. mean, he can go up and grip Russell Wilson's passes. So I think he could be a perfect fit at a cheap price. I think he's worth it. I think it's a great move. And he ran by somebody last Thursday night. They didn't get the ball to him, overthrew him, but he's still got the speed. I know he's coming back from an ACL and he's always injured, but I think it's a great move. And the other guy was even better move, 7th round pick for that guy. You guys could talk about him, but Mike Williams, yeah.
Yeah, I want to get into Preston Smith in a second because I think it's interesting knowing what his ceiling is. What do you think? I have heard the argument, though, from some people, Jim, and they're probably the same haters or whatever we want to call them that are on your message boards, but that what Mike Williams and George Pickens do, I don't know if you guys can see that or not. It's a Venn diagram. It's 2 circles. And what they do is altogether very, very similar, right? For those of you watching the video right now. Williams and Pickens, like you said, Williams, great moonball guy. Like he's going to go down the field and should win contested catches, should go get deep balls and be able to run under them for Russell Wilson. A lot of the same traits that George Pickens has. How do you think, at least initially, they find a way to get, Arthur Smith finds a way to get both of these guys on the field, not necessarily doing the same things at the same time, but finding a way for them to complement one another?
Well, because they're going to take pressure. Williams is going to take pressure off Pickens. I mean, they're not going to do it right away, but once Williams catches a moon ball or two from Russ, then the safety has to worry about him a little bit, that maybe there's too deep. Maybe the running game improves. Maybe tight end over the middle improves now. I mean, it opens things up. I think as long as he stays healthy, because we've seen he still has the speed, and I'm assuming he can still catch that moon ball. So as long as Pickens doesn't get pouty about it, and I doubt he will, I think Russell take care of all that and keep everybody satisfied. So, how could it be wrong? And the other thing, one more thing, blocking in run game. I know Van Jefferson's supposed to be the next Hines Ward. I know he gets as many snaps as Pickens because in theory he's a good blocker, but Williams is even bigger body. He should help even more.
All right, Jim, with these 2 moves now, how do you think the Steelers move forward now? Do you think that do they have the team, do you think, right now to contend for this division? Do you think they're that much more improved now? Or do you think the one thing they need more than anything is just to get these guys back and healthy? And once the lineup is set and ready to go, this team can make a move here in the AFC North and hold on.
Baltimore is not seemingly satisfied with their roster.
They made a couple moves yesterday.
Darius White these days, he must not be that good, because last I saw he was, and I haven't been following his career, but what they get for him, a swap of a late round 7th or something?
Yeah. He's dealt with a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, but I think you're right. Once that skill set is there, and I get age and injury can creep up on wide receivers and D-backs probably faster than any other position on the field aside from maybe running back, but I still think it's in there, right? And it's not necessarily what Tre'Davious White executes. It could simply be the idea of Tre'Davious White being across the ball from your wide receiver 1 or your wide receiver.
I like that. I know the years are flying by, but he can't be that old, right? I mean, wasn't Tre'Davious White just drafted a year or 2 ago?
You know how corners age, Jim. There's like dog years, right? He's 29. He's going to be 30 in January. So at the NFL level, we might as well be taking him out back with the old Yeller and the 12 gauge.
What did you say he is, 29?
Yeah, 30 in January. Yeah.
Wow. So the years are flying by. So it is on me. All right. Well, Deontay Johnson. I mean, how are the Steelers going to stop that comeback route he likes to run? And he don't just stop coming back when he catches the ball either. And that's going to be difficult to stop. No, be serious. Deontay's going to be a problem too. He's going to help them. So what it means, I don't know. I think Baltimore has the better team, more dangerous, especially until the Steelers can prove they can stop the run. They have proven they can stop the Ravens. So maybe it's just a different game they need to play. Maybe they've been playing different scheme against some of these teams that specialize in 11 personnel. We will see, but there are always injuries can happen too. So
that actually kind of leads into something I was going to ask you about regarding the Preston Smith deal. You mentioned they get him for relatively little, peanuts, basically, a late round draft pick. And I guess, should we consider this an indication maybe that Nick Herbig isn't as close to getting back into the lineup as maybe we had initially thought or would have initially hoped? Because, look, I don't think he's going to necessarily be stealing snaps away from TJ Watt or even Alex Highsmith for that matter. But we have seen that there are times where they will go to a rotation on the edge early in games sometimes in an effort to keep Watt and Highsmith fresh for later in the game. How does Preston Smith figure into that rotation, you think? And can he be as effective as he once was in Green Bay? And can he also be what Nick Herbig was when he was rotating in with those two?
Well, to start, you make a good point about does this mean Nick Herbig's not as healthy as we expected? I think he returned to practice. It wasn't much of a practice Monday. They were wearing hats. Mm-hmm. It was more like a walkthrough. So, but I thought he was going to be one of those potentially available. So maybe it's a week or two longer. I don't think it means that. I had to soften that supposition out of my guys, my guy Matt Steele's column today at Steel City Insider. I softened that a bit because I think Tomlin he loves Preston Smith. He always has. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had him in 2015 for a pre-draft visit. And as Ramon Foster tweeted, he has gone on and on about him in meetings, very detailed in meetings. So he has always liked him. And for a 7th round pick, and at that position, TJ's been playing a lot. Even if everybody's healthy, he wants to make sure TJ's getting his rest. And Preston Smith can also kick inside too, especially on pass downs. And they wanted that from DeMarvin Leal, and he's out for the year. So I'm not gonna believe that, even though it's a good theory. I'm not gonna believe. I believe Nick's gonna be back soon, and Nick's different because Preston Smith's a bigger guy, mm-hmm. more like Leal, and Nick Herbig's lighter and more quicker, a real wild card that I hope he doesn't lose any snaps when he comes back because of this. But they've got 4. Who am I missing? There's got to be another guy when healthy, right?
Jeremiah Moon is still around, right?
Okay, so I mean, four's quality, and he wanted Marcus Golden, and he was a quality veteran. So you get your quality veteran at a cheap price. I don't think Tomlin could pass on it. So I'm going to ignore the idea that it's because of Nick Herbig. There were some other questions you asked. I can't remember.
No, I think there's a good question about how he, and you addressed it, the idea of him maybe kicking inside and run situations, being on the field possibly at the same time as Watt and Highsmith in some of those situations. To circle back around to something you said earlier, this defense has struggled with the run. Maybe Preston Smith is able to help with that in those situations, although Alex Highsmith has certainly played the run well when he's been healthy as well. And just, the idea of how he rotates in, I think you addressed that, but it's, I do question if he can get back to the level where he was when it was Preston and Zadarius Smith on the edges in Green Bay, just wreaking havoc. Like that's not something everybody has with their 4th edge rusher, right? Like that's another level of that's more than just giving TJ and Alex a few reps off and going, okay, let's hope we can get by on these reps. That's adding a guy who can do almost as much as they can.
Yeah, I do like the comment section from Green Bay. They're upset. The fans are upset about this. So you got to like that. I really haven't watched Green Bay, so I don't know. Just to clarify, I think Preston helps them on pass downs by kicking inside.
Yeah.
He gives another pass rusher from the inside, but I mean, it really helps the run defense if he's playing outside. If Nick, you don't bring Nick in, you bring this guy in, and this is a sturdy guy, and so he would be probably the best run defending. I hate to knock TJ for anything, but the best, or if not, he's the second best run defender, and Alex is really good too. So maybe one of these guys can play inside linebacker. I don't know.
Hey, Jim, let's touch on the second half of the season for the Steelers coming up, which got
Brutal.
when people looked at it before the season started, it looked tough to begin with, but now Washington is unexpected at their pace, and now a lot of people would have said, "Oh, 6-2, we're going to go 7-2 once we play Washington," but now it's not definitely not a given. How do you feel the Steelers will play against it? They usually do good against rookie quarterbacks for the most part. This guy's special though. I mean, we've all seen him throw on the run. He can basically do anything he wants from the pocket, throw the ball down the field, run the ball. How do you think the Steelers will match up against Washington?
I haven't looked into Washington yet. I'm curious as to whether they got beat up this past week because the Steelers are coming off a bye, so the Steelers will be healthier. You always like that. That's always an advantage. I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me if Washington was beat up a little bit.
They got Brian Robinson's questionable at running back. They don't look really, like they're not too banged up other than that.
And they did go out, speaking of trade deadline moves, they go out and get Marshawn Lattimore. So, you talk about an interesting matchup maybe right out of the box between Marshawn Lattimore and either Pickens or maybe Mike Williams. We'll see. A couple of receivers that I think would much prefer getting free releases off the line against a corner who we know would much rather stand there and fight with you at the line of scrimmage than run down the sideline with you.
He's been a great player. And you just hope, hey, they should have some kind of agreement. Say, hey, I won't play Mike Williams since he's too new. If you don't play Marshawn Lattimore.
Good luck with that. Let me know how that works out. But yeah, I think there's an interesting question about JT brings up a really good point. The Steelers against rookie quarterbacks have traditionally done well. The Steelers against highly mobile quarterbacks, which Daniels can be at times, not all the time, but at times he can, if the pocket collapses. I mean, even though he didn't run, take no further look than that Hail Mary play against the Bears. He keeps it alive long enough for his receivers to get down to the goal line by moving around as well as he did. The Steelers have played well against mobile quarterbacks who can move the pocket or survive a collapsing pocket. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they do go after him. Do they try to contain him in the pocket with that pass rush, keep the lanes strict on the outside from those edge rushers and make him work from the pocket and make decisions there? Or do they try to flush him from it and chase him down? And do they bring extra men to do something like that?
Yeah, the mush rush. I first heard that term when people were defending Cordell Stewart. And Dick LeBeau started using that. And, I mean, look what they do with Lamar Jackson. So, if the running backs, is Robinson the number one running back for the Redskins? Mm-hmm. So if he's hurt, now you've got the Ravens of a few years ago without Derrick Henry. So you've got the lack of the Steelers are fast. They have a speed defense. Patrick Queen's better at buzzing the flats than he is taking blockers head on, brushing them off and tackling the running back. So, maybe this fits into the Steelers defense. I wouldn't bet money because of their record against rookie quarterbacks. I wouldn't bet money because of that. I think that's more of a Dick LeBeau stat. We can look up Tomlin's stats, and it might be great. Didn't he lose to a rookie quarterback last year? Cleveland's rookie quarterback, something like that.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
DTR, yeah.
Yeah.
Was unexpectedly starting in that game.
This kid seems to be special, so I don't want to bet money on that stat.
And Washington does have they have Eckler, Austin Eckler as a backup running back. They have some weapons on that offense. With McLaurin.
I never ever liked Austin Eckler, ever. And whenever he beat the Steelers, I'd say I'd be confounded because I've been written that this guy stinks. I think he's just a fantasy guy. I don't know.
Well,
San Diego get rid of him?
Yeah, I think that they decided not to, I guess, approach re-signing him. I think Eckler's a good point to bring up, though, Wex, because, you point out Patrick Queen's strength. hey, I'm going to read the quarterback. I'm going to buzz out to the flat and wrap this play up before it gains more than 4 or 5 yards. That's Eckler's bread and butter, right? Being that receiving running back on the edges. And, we've seen the Steelers when they do struggle on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, it's the run game that's gashed them, but we've also seen some big plays down the middle. And granted, Minkah Fitzpatrick is one man. He can't be everywhere. But I'm curious to see how they combat Terry McLaurin in this one. Is it a lot of doubling, as we've seen Minkah do this year against premier wide receivers, helping whichever corner McLaurin might line up against? Do they instead elect to send Joey Porter Jr. all over the field with McLaurin? Do they feel he's up to that task? That'll be something to watch, I think, because McLaurin is, once again, and we'll call him Scary Terry for nothing. He has been key to Jaden Daniels because every time he feels things breaking down, like we talked about, he can find McLaurin.
Well, that's one thing going against a rookie quarterback with 2 veteran safeties, especially one as skilled as Minkah, the disguising element. So I think they'll try their best, and they have the safeties to do it. They'll try their best to. And I don't know if Cam Sutton's going to play. Beanie was very Beanie confirmed that he was running number one on Monday. And that's often confusing after buys. Tomlin will, not that I don't think he's trying to throw curveballs at the media, but Mondays often change to Wednesdays on bye week with him. I mean, Wednesday becomes the prep. Mondays is a lot of times different. So keep that. But you still have Cam Sutton, and he is, a better camouflager, and he fits in with Minkah, and that could help them disguise against a rookie quarterback. So to answer your question about their wide receiver, could be more disguising. I don't know. Joey can't. That's one thing. Joey was 4.45. I mean, he's not 4.3, and he can't run with those guys. He grabs them, and that often hurts, and the refs see that. He's not that kind of corner. So it's a little scary in that regard. But to move on from the Redskins, you asked me about the second half of the season. We like you said, we knew it was going to be a tough second half. Now it seems worse because the Browns don't have Watson anymore. I mean, that was an unfortunate injury. Even though Winston, he can have really bad games too, but
he can have a really good game. That's what scares me.
He's wildly entertaining, right? One way or another. It's gonna be a fireworks show. You just don't know if they're gonna actually go up in the sky and go off the way they're supposed to, or if they're gonna combust on the ground.
And Cincinnati seems to have found their stride, and they even if they're out of it, they're going to be a tough spoiler. And Baltimore's better, I think, than we thought. I don't know why they lose some of the games they lose, but they seem to have gotten better. Kansas City, I always thought that would be the game the Steelers would win, and it still might be. Now, for a different reason, I thought they'd be a beat up 2-time defending champ that's going through the tough year that the 70s Steelers went through twice after being 2-time champs. You just don't do that. Well, they might be beatable now because they might be resting players at 12, 13, and 0.
Yeah. That's not a crazy thought, actually. Let me spin it back around to something that you brought up earlier when we talked about lessons learned in the first half of the season, because I think it relates to what we may see this weekend against Washington, specifically, and down the stretch as well. You mentioned Najee. Najee, 300-yard games in a row, only time he's done that in his career on the ground. And you mentioned as well, it seems to finally we seem to be finding a mesh between Najee's running style and the blocking schemes up front on the offensive line. It's been a long time coming, but it's finally working. This Commanders defense is 4th worst in the league in rushing yards yielded per game. I know we're all going to be real excited to see the shiny new toy and Mike Williams out there. And, we've talked a lot about what that may mean for what the offense looks like Sunday afternoon. Maybe this all comes back around, Jim, to, hey, Arthur Smith is here for a reason. And what's working is you're running the ball and then opening things up on the back end for Russ to take those shots occasionally, but you're running the football. Not to be too simplistic, but is that the prescription to escape Washington with a win on Sunday afternoon?
Well, there's all kind of things that seem to be opening up for Najee, and I think Russ is one of them. There was some question when you saw those free blitzers coming without any plan. The running back would take off in a pass pattern to the left, and a free blitzer or two would come from the right. It seemed like the quarterback was not setting the blocking properly. And that went back to Justin couldn't read the field in Chicago, things like that. Yeah. So I don't know that was true, but it made you wonder. Now Russ is just making it seem just easy. Everything seems right. There's none of those, as the defense says every week, communication breakdowns. So it might be Russ. And, Arthur's plan is taking effect. Arthur's getting to know Najee. I mean, he still tosses it to him outside. That toss outside and hurdling defensive backs is not going to continue to work. It must keep being used to keep the defense honest that Najee is not going to pound everything up the middle. But it seems that they're using him more properly up the middle and Jalen outside and on pass downs. I don't know if Arthur's getting a feel for his talent. Arthur's getting a feel for his blocking. The blocking's getting better. And now you've added another component, a second deep threat at wide receiver. And even Calvin's a deep threat now. Dick has to keep the safeties back. So I don't know how much Najee's going to run against stacked boxes anymore. So it all could be coming together with all of those things. So, yeah, and plus they're playing, as you said, another weak run defense. They played like 3 or 4 in a row. And it's all adding up. It could be a fun weekend at least, and on to the next difficult assignment. Which, yeah.
Jim, if there was a player in the second half that you think will really improve or become a bigger part of this team, is there a player that you feel will have a bigger role in the second half of the season?
Well, saying Zach Frazier is a little foolish. Because we all know he can play, but he's coming back. Calvin Austin seems to be. I mean, that's a no-brainer because he showed it for 2 games now that he's coming on. Is Van Jefferson coming on? Another guy, the big guy, Mount Washington. If I were to say him, that's not surprising anybody. I don't really have anybody to go out on a limb and take. Cordero Patterson showed us a lot before he was injured. Deshaun Elliott, we all know he's a ball player. It's got to be the inside linebackers and Keanu Benton. I think they've been a fairly disappointment. And Broderick Jones, there's another guy that has a potential to come on and be that guy. But I'm not going to say flat out that's my guy.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement with Broderick, if nothing else.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a guy we'd like to see come on in the second half. Wex, we got to thank you as always for your time. The holidays are right around the corner. Jim Wexell, one of the best authors of the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers out there. You can find plenty of his work on his website, jimwexell.com, right, Jim?
jimwexell.com, and I'll inscribe it for you. Christmas gifts, birthday gifts. I've been getting a lot of orders. Say hi to my grandson and, say something nice about football. jimwexell.com. You'll get the inscription. You get the autograph book at least. I autograph them all that go out. I ship them out. But they're at Amazon if you don't want to pay that shipping and handling. And they're at Barnes & Noble. I'll be at a few signings. We'll talk about that as our shows go on. I guess signing November 30th at Greensburg, Barnes & Noble. And then we'll talk more about those. But thank you for bringing it up, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, we appreciate your time going on the clock with us here at Draft Nation and Draft 412 for JT, for the Steel City insider himself, Jim Wexell. I'm Chris Mack. Thanks for joining us here at Draft Nation.